Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm Susan Bach, Program Lead at the Ontario Caregiver Organization, and I am your moderator. This webinar is a follow-up to two very well-received webinars that we offered in August. Our August webinars were about how to apply the skills of compassionate, nonviolent communication to caregiving. The questions you asked during those webinars were thoughtful and heartfelt, but we did not have time to answer them all. So we've invited the same presenters back to answer your questions. The focus today is on self-empathy and effective conflict resolution, structured using the questions that you had but were left unanswered in August. We've grouped those questions into four major themes to ensure that your main topics of interest are addressed today. Our presenters will explore and discuss how nonviolent communication skills can be applied to each theme. I'm pleased to once again introduce today's speakers, Marion Little and Mieko Issei. Marion holds a master's degree in dispute resolution and a BA in linguistics, and is a certified trainer with the International Center for Nonviolent Communication. Marion has taught undergraduate and graduate level courses in mediation, ethics, and collaborative leadership. She's served as an executive director and program manager for several social service agencies engaged in community care with marginalized populations. She also provides conflict resolution and communication skills workshops for adults and youth. Today, Marion will offer professional insights and practical strategies to support and enrich the caregiver experience. Mieko Issei has been a caregiver to both her parents and in-laws for over 10 years. It is Mieko's intention to use her lived experience to help other caregivers with their journeys and to be a catalyst for enhancing interactions between caregivers and healthcare professionals. Currently, she's involved in the Ontario Caregiver Organization, advising on the creation of new caregiver programs and services. Today, Mieko will provide practical examples for adopting empathy and compassionate communication towards self and others. Welcome, Marion and Mieko. I'll ask Marion to share her screen now.
Thanks so much, Susan. So we'll just do a little quick transition here and get the slideshow up and running. Before I do that, actually, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the land that we're on. I like to always begin by remembering where we are. And so I invite each of you to just take a moment and settle yourself into your chair. Notice the floor under your feet and the walls and floor, if there's more of that beneath that, and ultimately the earth itself. And I've learned with land acknowledgements, it's important to acknowledge the land itself. So let's just sort of take a minute of appreciation for where we are physically and the beauty around us. And also a moment to hold gratitude and respect for the Indigenous nations that have stewarded and maintained this land since time immemorial. So in this area where I am, Nogo-Jiwanong, Peterborough, it's the place at the end of the rapids, and that's the land of the Mississauga Anishinaabe First Nations. And my right to be here is governed by the Williams Treaty. And so if you don't know the territory that you're on, I encourage you to look into that. For me, this is an important part of empathy and self-empathy and honesty and conflict resolution, which is what we're going to talk about today. And just remembering that our relationships are inside of ourselves. We have a relationship with ourselves. We have a relationship with the people near us. We have relationships in society, and we have relationships in this larger context. And so one of those pieces of the larger context is the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people on this land. So I'll just share my screen, and we'll get going with the content of today's webinar. So, pardon me. So we're talking about nonviolent communication. This is a model developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg back in the 60s and 70s. And you can look him up for videos of him. And there are also books that he's written. The publisher is called Puddle Dancer Press. If one of the tech support people can write Puddle Dancer Press or find that link and put it in the chat, that might help folks find resources later. So today I'm going to do a quick overview of the themes. We organized your questions into specific themes and provide a little review of nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. This is the process that we were talking about in August for self-empathy and for navigating conflict. And I know there are some new folks on the call today, and if you were at those previous ones, I think you'll find this helpful to organize your thoughts as we go through the training today, or the workshop today, the questions and answers. And then we'll go through the themes category by category, and Mieko and I will explore some possible answers, recognizing that each of you are really the experts in your own situations. And so what we're offering today are really just some possibilities that you might want to consider. So we found that there were 5 themes that came up from the many questions. We actually had about 6 pages of questions from the chats from the last 2 seminars, and so really wanted to take the time to address them. So one was about how to discern needs. How do you figure out when you're feeling something, what the needs are? So that was a question that several people had. Another theme that came up was how to practice self-empathy and find strategies when it seems like there's no space for you, or when it seems like there just aren't any options. When your observations are internal and it's not about another person, or it's not about what somebody said to you, but it's about what you're thinking about. How do you practice self-empathy in that situation? And somebody also asked about how to deal with regrets and disappointments and frustration around major life decisions that might have been made in order to support your care recipient, and how to navigate some of that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. A lot of people had questions about what I would call how to translate hard to hear messages. Criticism was the word that many people used, but there are many more difficult messages than just criticism. So I've categorized that as how to translate hard to hear messages. And these are the kinds of messages that we get when people won't do the thing we want, when they tell us things that attack our character, when we have an idea of a strategy that we think will work and the other person refuses to take that strategy up. Those are messages that are hard for us. How to be heard. So a lot of people asked questions about how can I be heard by siblings who aren't primary caregivers, or by healthcare providers, or by my care recipient. How can I find my way to be heard? And so for me, this is about speaking with honesty without attacking. And so that's tricky because so many of us think of honesty as being kind of brutally honest, right? So we'll talk about how to be compassionately honest. And then the 5th theme that I've identified in terms of the content I can address has to do with how to navigate conflict when someone's behavior interferes with needs, or interferes with the strategies that I prefer to see those needs met. And the word that came up a lot was vulnerability. So as caregivers, many people had asked questions about what to do when their care recipient makes themselves vulnerable. And I've translated that to say someone's behavior is interfering with needs, or interfering with a strategy that I would prefer them to undertake. And it may make them vulnerable, it may not, I don't know. But what we're really looking at is that somebody's not willing to do a thing that you want. There were 2 other categories that we came up with that are beyond the scope of this presentation. And those are getting the most out of the healthcare system, which will be deferred to another time, and finding resources. And so the tech folks on the support call today will be referring you to the OCO website and helpline so that you can find more resources that way. So just as a really quick overview, and I'm just aware that I'm just checking my clock because I don't have a really good sense of time, and I want to make sure that I stay on track for you. Okay. So nonviolent communication, as I said, was developed by Marshall Rosenberg. And it's really like a dance between three aspects. So we begin down in the rocks and dirt where our thoughts of shame or blame or should or judgment might be. And it's not that those things are bad. They may be accurate, they may be useful. The thing is that if that's what we offer to other people, it's really difficult for them to receive us. And if it's what we directed ourselves, it's really difficult for us to identify what we're really struggling with. And so just like the tree filters up out of the rocks and dirt, filters up the nutrients, the water, the minerals, and ultimately can provide sap, sweet sap out the trunk for maple syrup making, or oxygen out the branches and leaves. The tree is constantly taking in from the rocks and dirt, taking in from the carbon dioxide and putting out oxygen, putting out sweetness. And so how can we do that? Well, we can begin in our thoughts of should, blame, judgment down in the rocks and dirt. Shift up into self-empathy. So we're filtering up into self-honesty and self-empathy. What did I actually see or hear? How am I feeling about it? How can I tend my own needs around that? How can I fill my cup? And then from there, I may choose to express myself with honesty. I may choose to listen with empathy. Maybe I hear back something I don't like. I can go back down into self-empathy. And I just kind of continue to move the same way that a tree and water and air, you know, are always in a cycle together. So we've talked about that structure of empathy and honesty, and it begins with, there are actually 4 steps to it. It begins with making a clear observation. What did I actually see or hear? How do I feel about it in my heart? What are my needs? And I'm thinking about needs in a universal way. So money, for example, is not a need. It's a strategy that we use to meet many needs, like food and shelter and play and other things like that. So, and then from the needs, we want to make a request, a clear request, either of ourselves or of somebody else. So the observation, again, is distinct from evaluation or judgment. It's clear, concrete, and specific. When we're touching into feelings, we want to make sure that we're teasing that apart from evaluations and assessments. So what could I experience alone on an island with a volleyball named Wilson, like Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway? So I could be sad, glad, mad, disappointed, hopeless, frustrated, all these kinds of things. I can't feel manipulated or used, or, you know, things like that. Those could be accurate evaluations of somebody's behavior, but they are evaluations of somebody's behavior. And then I want to connect to needs. And so here we have some main categories for needs. And these needs theory actually comes out of the Blackfoot First Nation in northern Alberta. And that's how Abraham Maslow learned about that. And then he carried that out into into his career as a leader in psychology. And so here we have community actualization or well-being, and there's a collection of needs that we might name around that. Belonging. If you can't see that, you can actually hover over where the video images are on the side, and you can move that out of the way. If you put your cursor on the top of the faces, probably where you can see my face, you can move the that little screen out of the way if it's covering your words on the slide. Safety, so these are needs associated with that kind of umbrella category: physical survival, self-actualization or self-well-being, and relationship to land and earth. So these are these are general categories. They're co-occurring. It's not a hierarchy. And we could spend a lot of time talking more about that. We will a little bit today. Once we've identified our own needs, when we're in that self-empathy section, a really important phrase to say to ourselves is no wonder. No wonder I'm frustrated. That need for choice is so important. Every human being has it. They've had it since the beginning of time. Anybody would be in distress if they believed that their need for choice was going unmet. No wonder I'm in distress. And so sometimes we can just bring compassion to ourselves in that way. When we make requests of others, we want to make a connection request before we make an action request. So connection requests are something like, how are you? After hearing that choice matters to me so much, or what's the main thing you're hearing me say? So in one case, I'm asking for the other person's honesty, how are they? And in the other case, what are you hearing me say? I'm actually inviting empathy from them. I'm wanting them to just reflect back. Once I have a sense of connection, and that may take more than one conversation, then I can shift to action requests. Would you do X? And my actions, I want them to be clear, concrete, specific, and doable, and ideally in the present time. So it could be as simple as, could we make a time to talk about this more later? So this is the structure with the 4 steps, observation, feelings, needs, requests, and how we engage those as we speak with honesty and listen with empathy. And we're going to use this structure as we go through each of the themes of your questions. So just as a reminder, this is a dance. We're moving back and forth between self-empathy, honesty, speaking our truth without attacking, listening without taking on the judgment and blame that other people might put on us. And then if we're in distress, we go back into self-empathy, we try again with our honesty, and we're just dancing like that. So again, these are the questions that came up from the last sessions. And so we'll begin with question 1 about how to discern needs. And so I just want to check in, Mieko, you had some comments about, I think you wanted to begin with shame, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so would you just sort of share maybe 3 minutes about kind of what you were thinking about that, or the shoulds and things? And
well, I think everyone can relate to feelings of shame while they're caregiving. So I thought of one example that I had lived through, and it was, I had been caregiving for quite some time. I was quite tired, and I just wanted to have a bit of a break. So I thought I was going to go to a movie and just relax. But then my care recipient called, and I literally lied about my plans. I just said I was too busy. I made up some story. I can't even remember what the story was. And I felt so shameful. And I was thinking about, why did I do that? And I know why, because I was afraid my care recipient was going to say, well, I need you more, come see me. And also I felt very, I think shame and guilt go together. I felt very guilty that I was going and doing something fun when my care recipient was suffering. And so, as I said, I had all these sort of should thoughts, like, you know, why should I need a frivolous break? Well, I shouldn't have lied. I shouldn't assume my care recipient would be self-centered, even though they've done that before in the past. And then then you move into blaming. I started blaming my care recipient doesn't listen to me, doesn't listen to my needs. I get angry with her, and you know, and then I started blaming myself, like, why am I so susceptible to my care recipient's guilt trips, you know? And then I moved into labeling myself, thinking, I'm just must be too afraid or weak to stand up to my care recipient, tell them how I really feel. And then finally, I was just saying, yes, I was just being selfish. So those were sort of the whole scenario, just for one.
Thanks, Mieko. That's perfect. That's wonderful. And I'm guessing that lots and lots of people on the call can really relate to that. And so I want those of you on the call to just take a moment and think through some of the things that Mieko had said about calling what she was doing frivolous, about her judgments about herself for lying to her care recipient, about the expectations she has of herself and the expectations she has of the care recipient in that scenario. And what I want you to do is to just take a quick look at these groupings of needs and just see if you can pick out one need that you think is really present for, for Mieko in this situation. So, so if somebody is saying, I shouldn't have lied, if the concern is about truth, then what is the need? So this is an example for you. And I would say that the need is probably a need for honesty or truth. And so this is not a comprehensive list, but you can try and pull things from this list. So let's try another one. If she says, I shouldn't be taking a frivolous break, what might the need be? What is Mieko yearning for is another way to think about that. So maybe just type in the chat there, what is she yearning for? So don't raise hands because we won't be able to answer questions beyond the 5 pages that we're trying to navigate today. But please, I do want to see your answers in the chat so that we can get some of that. So if Mieko is labeling herself, so in terms of frivolous, saying something is frivolous and I shouldn't take a break, right? Probably the yearning is around play or around respite, around stimulation, around rest. Could be a whole lot of things. When Mieko is saying, I'm too weak to tell my recipient how I really feel, what's she needing there? What's she yearning for? What might that be? See if you can make a couple of guesses in the chat. Can you see something on these lists that might, yeah, right. So, yeah, so it could be a need for integrity. It could be a need for mutual respect, for being seen and heard. It's hard to know, and you've got some great thoughts in there too. Mieko, are you seeing any in the chat that fit for you?
And, this is hindsight because this happened many years ago. And it's funny, and this is not a setup to your next slides, but what I learned is that I had to accept the feelings I was having. I would be fighting them. That was part of the whole thing. Like, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't feel this way. I should be strong or whatever. I'm going to validate my feelings. I'm having them. And I'm not going to feel ashamed and angry at myself for having them. And then that gave me time to figure out what were the needs. And that's exactly what you were saying, Marion, like to figure out what I actually really needed. So
what guesses
did works? That's what I want to say to everybody.
What guesses did folks make that fit for you that you see in the chat?
Oh, a lot of them. The self-actualization and physical survival, for sure. Those two.
And anything specific in those categories, like
rest,
stimulation.
Yeah. Also just the respect, because there was this feeling about, you're not my care recipient not respecting my needs at all, but then you're sympathetic because you know that they're suffering. But it's like you were saying about being in a dance. It's not, there's 2 people dancing, and I just felt like I was never being considered at times. But
yeah, so this is really, really important. And the first step to figuring out, oh, now I have to go backwards. The first step to figuring out what matters to us is noticing the feeling. That's the notifier, like the notifier on your cell phone. And when our cell phone goes off, we don't just leave it there. Why? Because it could be an important message could be coming in. So when the notifier goes off, we open our cell phone and we find out what's the text message coming in. Well, our system also gives us notifiers, and those notifiers are feelings. So when the feelings come up, it could be contraction and tightness, it could be expansiveness and ease. They're letting us know that something matters, and it's something that matters in us, between us, or in the world around us. So that's how we interact with needs. They're co-occurring, they're in us, they're between us, and they're around us. And the more skilled we become at discerning what is my need, at noticing the feeling and discerning my need, the better equipped we are to represent ourselves, to find more strategies, more choices for meeting our needs. but also to respond to the needs of somebody else, to have empathy and care and to support somebody else. This to me is a really key piece to preventing burnout and ensuring that we're resourcing ourselves really well. Mieko said something at the very beginning about shame and guilt. And so down at the bottom of this list, you can see shame in brackets. And I've put it there in brackets because when we experience something like shame or guilt, resentment also could be a little bit in there, but really with shame and guilt, we're taking our intense feelings of pain and we're blending them with our intense feelings of pain, and we're blending them with our thoughts of judgment. So we're down in the rocks and the dirt at the base of the tree, and we're pulling our heart down into the rocks and the dirt rather than filtering up to find out what actually matters. And so when we filter up, once we filter out those thoughts of should and labeling and the shame and the blame, what we find when we start filtering up the tree is regret. And there's a kind of sweetness to regret, because regret says, oh, I wish I had known then what I know now. I wish I had known how to meet my needs in a way that honored the needs of the other person. And so that's where we're sitting with regret. And when we make apology out of a place of regret, it's much richer than when we come out of a place of shame and should. So anyway, I'm aware of the time and I won't spend too much more on that, but to say that each of these feelings, which we identified in your questions around fear and anxiety and stress, around hopelessness and depression, again, depression is that state where we're thinking thoughts of judgment and shame, and in that case, we're directing them at ourselves. And so it's like pulling our heart and our intense feelings of pain down into the rocks and kind of being stuck there. And it's the same with shame and guilt. It's the same with resentment. That's where we take our feelings of pain and our thoughts of judgment down in the rocks and we fling it at other people. And so instead, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that it's not as likely to help you get your needs met. And I know how important that is for folks that are caregiving, to have your needs met. You matter. And like so many of you said in the last call, if caregivers' needs are not met, then they're not resourced to tend to the people they're caregiving for. And that's exactly what Mieko was saying. So take the time to notice, when am I thinking shame and blame and judgment, whether I'm directing it at me or directing it at other people. If my feelings are mixed with that, then I want to do some filtering and begin to kind of draw up the tree. What did I actually see or hear? Oh, I said to my care recipient, I was going to the movies, or I had to work late, but really I was going to the movies. And I feel some regret because I really value rest for myself, but I also really value integrity. And I'm not in integrity with myself when I tell them a thing that isn't accurate or true. And so I'm wishing that I had let them know what I was doing, or that I had found a way to do that, or that maybe I'm noticing as I think about that there are other needs that are wanting my attention, and that I was afraid that those needs wouldn't be met. And so I put up this protective way through not telling them what was actually going on. And so that's a strategy, but maybe it didn't work the way that I wanted, because it didn't meet my needs for integrity. And I did get the rest and I did get the play, but integrity matters to me too. So how am I going to tend to that in the future? So I might choose to say something to the other person, I might not. It's totally fine to just process that yourself and make new choices next time. And to have compassion for yourself in the moment. So checking out these needs, we want to not just stay in the umbrella needs, but get underneath and figure out what else is going on there. And if you go to the Puddle Dancer Press website, they actually, I think, have lists of needs that you can look at. So what I just walked through with reciting Mieko's situation was sitting down in those thoughts of shame and blame and should, taking a breath, noticing, and beginning to filter that through. And filtering is about self-empathy, but it's also about self-honesty. It's about being honest with ourselves about what are we seeing and hearing, what is really going on for us. And then at the end of that self-empathy piece, to take Mieko's situation further, in addition to noticing what needs I have, I also want to make some requests of myself. I want to fill up my own cup. And so one request of myself, I can just, oh, wow, that need for integrity and rest and creative play, that those are so important to me. No wonder I was frustrated. No wonder I was exhausted, and have some compassion for myself. And notice I'm saying no wonder, the feeling, because this need matters. The feeling and the need is linked. So we want to come up with ways to fulfill that need. So if the need that was unmet in that situation for Mieko was integrity, for example, I would encourage her to come up with a way to tend it alone, with another person, for community, and in nature. And this seems like a lot, but what I'm trying to do here is to invite you to come up with choices for yourself. Because in this moment, Mieko is hoping that need might be met by the relationship with the care recipient. And in that situation, that isn't what was happening. So before Mieko returns to the care recipient, I want to invite her to kind of fill up her cup a little bit. So, so Mieko, you liked the idea of being specific about some of the strategies. And I'm just curious, if you were, pardon me, to meet your need for play or rest. Sorry, I'm having a bit of an allergic reaction to the pollen in the air at this time of year. If you were wanting to meet your need for rest and integrity, and you want to meet those needs without cutting one of them out, without thinking about your care recipient, how could you do that alone? What's one thing you could do alone? And people can put in the chat, what's one thing Mieko could do alone that would meet the need for integrity? It could be very, very small, like making and keeping a little promise. I'm going to floss my teeth tonight, and I floss my teeth, right? So what we're trying to do is come up with strategies that do not involve the person who set off the feeling of distress. So you're filling your own cup before you return to them. Do you have any thoughts, Mieko?
Well, yeah, it was not one small thing. I had to change the way I thought about things, because it's funny when you were saying, oh, when she went to the movie, she fulfilled her thing of play. No, I didn't, because I was feeling guilty the whole time and I didn't enjoy myself. So I realized I had to start thinking differently and also react differently to how other people react to me, and also interpret it differently. So as I mentioned in our webinar, it was like, just stop taking everything so personally. And another big thing I did was I stopped expecting people to be different or to be the way I want them to be. I just had to expect it that way. And then I just had to also accept that sometimes caregiving isn't fair. Sometimes you do have to work when you're tired. You do need to give up things. And I didn't have a problem with that at the beginning, but I think a lot of the people on this webinar can relate that you reach rock bottom sometimes when you've gone through a whole series. So I really wish I had this tree image that you had back then, because I could say, okay, I'm in the rocks now, it's okay, and move up. Because I must admit, I kept going up a little bit, down into the rocks, up a bit. It wasn't a nice flow all the way up. So, but yeah, so that's what I do mostly, is change my thinking.
Thanks for that, Mieko. So one of the things that we can do when we are sort of in that rock bottom place, or where it just seems like there are no other choices, is we can try to find, and Mieko's talking about some fairly large scale shifts in thinking. And sometimes those shifts just don't seem even possible in the moment. Sometimes we're just too overwhelmed to make that shift of thinking that Mieko's talking about. And those shifts can be so helpful if we can just realize that people are who they are, and they're doing what they're doing because that is what meets their needs. It's not actually really about us, although maybe they want us to help them meet their needs, right? So, but it's really, people's behavior comes out of their expression of their needs, their desire to have needs met. So one way that we can tend that is to take some time alone. And if the need was around integrity or the need was around accountability, then I want to come up with ways to do that alone. And so I can do that in a lot of little ways, like making and keeping a promise to myself, or, you know, I'm going to walk my dog, or I'm going to do something in the garden, or I could journal. If I'm a praying person, I could pray. The idea is to do small, concrete, specific things that just help give me a teeny tiny bit of breathing room. Because once I get a little bit of breathing room, it's a lot easier to start looking towards those bigger shifts. And so when people are doing that self-empathy piece and they're still in the trunk of the tree, I invite you to try to come up with 4 strategies to meet your need that do not involve the other person. And the reason I say to come up with things that do not involve the other person is because when you leave them, let's say your need was for health and well-being. Let's say something has happened and they're refusing to do something that supports their health and well-being, and you're walking out of that room and your needs for health and well-being are unmet now, because you're in distress because you want health and well-being for the other person. But when you leave them, you're still walking around with unmet needs for health and well-being, and you want it for yourself, you want it in relationship, you want it in the whole world. And what that means is that everywhere you encounter it being unmet, you're going to be a little bit more reactive. So if I walk away from a situation where I'm aware of the need for health and well-being in the world, and I'm in distress around that, and I don't come up with strategies for myself, then let's say somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm going to just really get mad at them. I'm going to be disproportionately upset about that. Let's say my teenage child comes home 2 or 3 hours later than expected. Well, now, you know, I'm bottoming out and I'm dumping that need on everybody I come across because I'm not empowering myself to take responsibility for it, to claim it. And part of claiming it is noticing that it's there, coming up with these very little strategies to tend it, to give me a little bit of breathing room, to fill my cup a little bit, so that when I return to my care recipient, they are not my only strategy for tending health and well-being. And what it means is I actually have more flex and more creativity. It also means that when somebody I love does a thing that another person does a thing that I perceive as not serving health and well-being, I'm less likely to fly off the handle because I have resourced myself a little bit. And so this is a way that we can do that. This isn't the only piece. So don't worry, we're still going, you can still speak to the other person, we can still listen. This is just one piece. And for me, it's a very important piece for self-soothing. And it's especially important in situations where I feel like, or it seems like I just don't have a whole lot of choices. This becomes very important. And there are people in just incredibly challenging situations throughout history who have practiced this kind of thing as a mindfulness practice and as a way to resource themselves to stay present in just outrageously difficult situations. Viktor Frankl's book, In Search of Meaning, is actually a beautiful example of that during the Second World War. So we want to go from, pardon me, self-empathy to answering this question about how do we translate hard to hear messages? How do we translate criticism? So somebody has said a thing to me and I didn't like it. Maybe they say, so what was one of the things that somebody had on the list here?
Did you want me to use my example, or?
Yeah, if you want. I do have some here from the participants. So, for example, somebody said they have a father who criticizes them constantly and says they do nothing and talks, says things about the caregiver to other people to the point they're being, the father, the care recipient is accusing the caregiver of stealing from them, having pushed and hurt him, and how painful that is, you know, for, as a caregiver to be dealing with that, and how we internalize that and begin attacking ourselves, right? The other question or comment that somebody had is how they keep running into this difficult messages with caregivers where, or sorry, healthcare providers, where they might be saying, well, we're only here to make sure that your care recipient gets care and not to do anything for you. And, you know, that sort of they perceive as dismissing them or something like that. And you had a situation too, Mieko. What was that?
Well, I think it basically fits into what you've just said. It's just about, in my situation, I'm the primary caregiver, and I have a sibling that is not involved at all, but to my care recipient would be so happy and so agreeable to the sibling that doesn't really visit. And then I would hear all the complaints and the worries that they had. And then I would actually be criticized for my caregiving from the non-involved sibling as well as the caregiver, because, you know, they would, or care recipient, they'd be saying, yeah, you should listen to this person. So it was interesting about that. But I think the examples you said are spot on anyways. I just wanted to say something about self-empathy. Like, what made it hard for me to find self-empathy is that, and I'm hoping that this will help give clarity to others, because what I found is I had trouble with self-empathy because I have this non-involved sibling who would use words like self-care. I have to take care of myself. I'm too stressed to do anything, to not caregive. Like, that was the big excuse. So it started to make me think that self-empathy and self-care was being selfish. So when it started coming on for me to do self-care, I resisted. I went, no, I don't need that. I am not a selfish person, you know, type of thing. But, you know, over time you realize self-empathy has nothing to do with making excuses to not do what you need to do.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up, and it actually fits really nicely, Mieko, into this theme of questions, because if we're going to translate criticism, if we're going to translate other hard to hear messages, you know, we have to begin with self-empathy, because it hurts when we hear those things. We want to be able to tend what's going on in ourselves. And that piece about what's the difference between being selfish and taking care of ourselves, or selfishness and self-empathy? And I would say that the difference is that selfishness is when we meet our needs at the expense of other people. And self-empathy is when we meet our needs in a way that also honors other people. Our needs are never in conflict. And so if we're diving down into where the needs are and developing strategies that come from a place of needs, and from this dance back and forth where we're also listening to the needs of other people, then we tend to come up with strategies that are mutually respectful, that are reciprocal, where selfishness is about my way or the highway, my needs or nobody's needs. And in a way, we could say that if I'm holding on to my strategy and that's it, my strategy for meeting needs and nobody else's strategy, that's also taking care of things at the expense of other people's needs. Mm-hmm. And so, so we want to really distinguish between that and be aware that when we're paying attention to needs and tending our needs and being aware of the needs of other people, that we're doing that in a way that's reciprocal and that's dancing back and forth. And that's why we move up out of the trunk. And the tree doesn't just keep all the sap down in the trunk, it moves up all the way up to the leaves and helps the leaves do their work in translating carbon dioxide into oxygen. And so this is a very healing cycle. And so as we translate up and we soothe ourselves and fill our cup a little bit, we begin to listen to other people. And so when we're listening to somebody else and they say one of these difficult messages, that I'm gonna challenge you, and that this is hard and it seems counterintuitive to listen to what somebody else feels and needs when they've just said something horrible to you. This seems kind of counterintuitive, I know, but I've found it a huge relief to shift from taking on the labels and taking on the judgments that other people have of me, and to become curious about what do they feel, what do they need. And so instead of, you know, when somebody says, oh, well, what was it? Oh, here's one. Somebody's sibling said to them, oh, well, you knew what you were getting into when you decided to take on their care, right? So maybe I've expressed some frustration and they're like, well, you took this on. You knew what you were getting into. You made your bed, you know, go lie in it. And so that's a difficult message. That's a difficult thing to hear. So here's the challenge. What are they feeling? What are they needing? So the same thing that you practiced with yourself in the last 2 webinars, the same thing that we just guessed for Mieko, which was probably much easier because Mieko is the caregiver. Now we're going to guess that for somebody who's saying a difficult thing. So what might they be feeling? Mieko, do you want to give a guess? What feeling might be coming up for the sibling who says, well, you knew what you're getting into?
Well, I can just use my own example of how I felt when I got very similar.
So I'm going to challenge you though. I want you to think about, how does the sibling feel?
Well, how does the sibling feel?
Yeah.
I think they feel threatened, that they don't want to have to do the work, so they're trying to find an excuse. So they push back. That's
so maybe they're scared. Yeah, they could be scared. Maybe they're feeling, maybe they're actually mixing their feelings of pain with their thoughts. And so maybe they have some shame and some guilt and some blame. Maybe they're doing a lot of that, right? That's maybe what's going on for them. But if we get under their guilt and shame and blame, what else might they be feeling? They might be scared. They might be worried.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. What would you call this, Marion? It's like when you don't want to break out of your denial of the situation, because I can only use my own example. My sibling main reason for not contributing was saying that there was nothing wrong. The care recipient's totally fine, which is denial. It was obvious things were declining. So is that fear of not wanting to see the truth, or just denial?
So yeah, so when we judge something as denial, we're saying, well, that person doesn't, you know, share my perspective, my reality. I still think that it's helpful for us to figure out what might they be feeling and what might they be needing. Because if I start trying to think about what they're thinking about, I'm going to drive myself nuts. So instead of getting all caught up in what do they think I'm thinking that they're thinking, or that's a fast road to a lot of frustration. So maybe we can think about what they might be feeling. And I know that lots of folks have put in some suggestions in the chat box. Mieko, can you see? I can't see it. Can you see any of the feeling words that people have?
Their sibling doesn't feel they're good enough.
They don't feel that they're good enough. So again, that would be a judgment. Thank you for taking the risk to put a suggestion in there. So if they don't think they're good enough, what might they be feeling? What's in their heart? What could they experience all alone on an island with a volleyball?
Someone said fear.
Fear, yeah. What else?
I'm just looking to see. It's could be old resentments too, about how they were parented and they don't feel the obligation. They feel they should have to take care of
right. So there could be fear, there could be some frustration, there could be confusion, these kinds of things. So now the trick is, what do they need? So they're saying something that's really hard for me to hear. And the reason they're telling me this hard to hear thing is because they literally do not know how to say what they're feeling and what they're needing. And even if I said to them, what are you feeling? What are you needing? A person might not be able to answer that, because most of us haven't had lots of time to develop that kind of vocabulary. It takes some practice. So I want to try and guess, oh, maybe they're feeling scared. And what might they be needing? So I want you to think about that needs list. And the needs are something that stand sort of on their own, separate from time and space. And so what might they be needing? If you said there might be old resentments around how they were tended as children, what are they yearning for then?
I just want to interrupt because I got a time thing saying that we only have a few minutes left, and I
Yeah.
don't know whether we should do the role play, because as a caregiver, I felt that was so valuable to go through that. Even in hindsight, for me, it was valuable.
Sure. Yeah, we can totally shift over to that. So just to finish this little piece, what I would say is that the other person is perhaps needing nurturance themselves. And so it's really difficult for them to think about nurturing a parent, maybe when they didn't receive the nurturing that they were yearning for. Maybe there was something difficult for them. It could be that they're needing information, could be that they're needing clarity. It's really hard to know. And so we can guess, you know, sister, are you feeling frustrated because you would really, you know, like to be tended, or you would really like to be nurtured yourself? Well, no, that's not it at all. They're fine. And I don't want, you know, to, I just don't think that they need support right now. Oh, so maybe it's about, is this about just being able to trust that our parents are okay, and being able to count on them, right? So maybe acknowledging that they need support means that they're no longer the support that has been available. Mm-hmm. So it could be any of these things. This is empathy. We guess. We don't tell. We just guess. Are you feeling because you need? Are you feeling because you value is another way to say that. The other side of this is to speak with honesty. And is the role play that you had in mind, Mieko, is that the one where we were dancing back and forth?
Yes, it was the one, and also addressed a lot of the questions that people had about how your care recipient has no idea that they make themselves vulnerable. And I just used one of the examples because, and I went through this 3 times with 3 of my care recipients about when they started to get shaky and have balance, and they needed to use a walker.
Yeah. Okay.
I would like to play the care recipient because I know all.
Okay, so let's do it. So in order to be heard, we want to be able to speak our truth, to speak our honesty without attacking. And so we're going to avoid bringing up the rocks, the thoughts of shame and blame and labeling. And instead of that, we've filtered it through our self-empathy, and that equips us to say, oh, when I see or hear this, I feel X because I need Y. Would you be willing to tell me what you heard? Would you be willing to let me know what's up for you when you know how important choice is to me, or whatever? Would you be willing to do a specific action? So when I see or hear something, I feel something because I need, and you want to use a need word, not I need you to, but I need choice, or I need support or information. Would you, and we can do something specific. So we're going to do a little bit of a dance here between self-empathy, empathy, and honesty. And so Mieko and I are going to do it back and forth. And when I'm in my own head, I'll do this so that you know I'm speaking to myself. Okay. So Mieko, give me the situation again. Was it about the walker? Somebody.
So the person needed a walker because they were having some falls. Luckily, nothing serious yet, but it was imminent. So you bring in the walker.
Okay. And we've discussed it. So I bring in the walker and I say, hey, Dad, you know, look, I got that walker finally came, and it's looking good. Got it all set up for you, and here you go.
I told you I don't need the walker. I'm very careful. I won't fall.
So right away, I'm set off. So I'd be like, okay, I'm really worried. So observation, we talked about this. We went over it. He said he would take it, and now he's refusing it. I'm feeling really scared and worried because I have a need for reassurance around safety, and I have a need for, I don't know, just like predictability or something, that things will be remembered and things like that, and that's really hard right now. So I come up with some ways to tend those needs, and now I'm going to try empathy. So Dad, I'm remembering that we talked about having the walker, and now I'm hearing you say you didn't want it. So I'm wondering if you're feeling kind of, I don't know, cautious about it because you just want, yeah, I'm not sure. What is it that matters to you in all of this?
Well, no, walkers are for old people. I don't want a walker.
So is this, are you, is it that you're kind of frustrated, or you're kind of disgusted by the walker, and you want, or you're just really needing your own dignity?
Well, yes, I'm the parent, and I feel like you giving me the walker makes me feel as if I can't take care of myself. And like, you're the child, I'm the parent. This isn't right.
Right. So it's also about, wow. So I didn't realize that. It sounds like, so I'm still over here in empathy. Sounds like it really matters to you. This is another way of talking about needs. It sounds like it really matters to you to be seen as competent and dignified, and to also to be able to support us.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a big part of your identity.
That's right. And if I have a walker, I can't do my gardening.
Oh yeah. You're such, I mean, your gardener is so beautiful. Everybody loves to come and see the garden. And gosh, yeah, I hadn't even thought of what it would mean in the garden. Wow. Is there anything else that you're wanting me to know about what matters to you around this?
Well, it's just, I feel that it makes me feel old.
Yeah. Okay, so there's something about dignity, something about, holding on to your competence as an adult, and the person who's supporting your kids. And there's also something, I'm guessing, about freedom and just being able to take pleasure in the garden.
Yes.
So now that Dad has been heard, and even Mieko in the role play did this, yes, and kind of took a breath. And so when you see that body relax in the jaw or in the shoulders, or a bit of a breath, that's the person saying, yeah, I've been heard. I trust that you value my needs. So now there's an opportunity for me to say, with my honesty, so, thanks for letting me know that. When I hear you say you won't use it, I'm just really worried about your safety. And I would like some reassurance that you're going to be safe, because I want you to also have dignity and to, to have your independence and be able to get out in the garden. Could we set up a time to sit down and come up with some ideas around what that might look like? And so when Mieko and I were talking about this before, what very naturally came out then was, what were some of the ideas, Mieko?
Well, you were just saying you could take me to Lee Valley to see if there was any accessories to go with the walker to help with gardening. And then we just talked about how not wanting to be a burden, and this was a way that he could still contribute to the family by, this would make him actually more independent if he had the walker versus not having it.
Right. And also in the role of the dad, Mieko came up with the strategy of maybe doing some muscle exercises at the community center and things like that to help retain balance. And another was that maybe a cousin or somebody could come and help with the vacuuming, because hauling the vacuum was a particular balance risk. So this is the dance back and forth. Those are the strategies at the end, but the strategies will come up based on your situation, and the needs come up based on your situation. And so what we've done here, we've begun at the bottom. We filtered up, what am I seeing, feeling, needing? How can I take care of myself? I try to listen to the other person. If I can't, I go back down into empathy. I try listening again. When I see some relaxation over there, I try my honesty again. I might begin with honesty and they react. I go into self-empathy and then back over to empathy. So I'm really just moving around based on what's happening, and it takes practice. And it's like anything, we really want to begin with how we're talking to ourselves. Don't worry so much about all this up here. If you practice how to listen to yourself, it will come naturally. So I would be curious in the chat for you to enter, how do you feel right now? And what needs of yours were met? And I know Susan also has a survey for you to complete. And so
thank you, Marion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marion. Thanks very much. I'd like to close out by saying, on behalf of the Ontario Caregiver Organization, thank you very much, Marion and Mieko, for putting so much time and collaborative effort into preparing these responses to questions that we've received about compassionate communication. To our participants, today's webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to the OCO video page on Vimeo if you want to view it again or tell a friend about it. Also, please visit OCO's website for free information and resources on caregiver mental health and education, online peer support groups, support during COVID-19, and many tip sheets addressing caregivers' concerns.